Dawn came slowly that cold morning, bringing with it a cutting wind that infiltrated through the cracks of the precarious shelter under the bridge. Kayla, a 12-year-old girl with big brown eyes and disheveled black hair, had a countenance marked by a forced maturity that no child should carry. Her right leg, deformed since birth, remained stretched out on the cardboard that served as a mattress for her and her little brother Eli. Kayla's small calloused hands trembled, not just from the cold that seemed to penetrate her bones, but from a distressing intuition that tightened her chest. "Eli, we need to get up now. The day has already begun, and we need to find something to eat," whispered Kayla, brushing away a strand of hair from her brother's face. Kayla noticed something different that morning. The silence was too disturbing. Normally, Eli woke up easily, always with a smile that lit up his little face, even in the most difficult circumstances. It was that smile that kept Kayla's hope alive, that gave meaning to her daily struggle for survival in the hostile streets. Since their parents had died 6 months ago, she had become not just a sister, but a protector, caretaker, and confidant to little Eli, just 4 years old. The boy, with his almond-shaped eyes and still round cheeks despite the evident malnutrition, was all that remained for Kayla. "Eli, why are you so quiet today? Are you cold?" she asked, gently touching her brother's face, feeling a shiver run down her spine as she noticed the temperature of his skin. Kayla's heart instantly accelerated, panic growing like a wave inside her. Eli's skin was ice-cold, with a frightening pallor that contrasted with his naturally golden tone. His lips, normally rosy and smiling, now displayed a bluish tone that betrayed something terribly wrong. The girl placed her ear close to her brother's mouth, then over his small chest, desperately searching for any sign of breathing or heartbeats, but finding only a terrifying silence. "Eli, don't joke with me like this, please." "Wake up, little brother, look at me," exclaimed Kayla, her voice breaking with the growing desperation that was taking over her being. Time seemed to freeze for Kayla at that moment. All the sounds of the waking city were replaced by the buzz of terror in her ears. As in a flash, images of the past few days passed through her mind. Eli coughing during the night, complaining of chest pain, refusing the little food she managed to find. Signs she had noticed, but attributed to the cold and constant hunger that accompanied them. Kayla felt a crushing guilt weighing on her shoulders as thick tears began to stream down her dirty face. "I can't lose you too, I can't." "You're all I have in this world, Eli," she shouted, shaking the small, inert body with growing desperation. In an impulse driven by panic and determination, Kayla wrapped her brother in the only ragged blanket they owned. Ignoring the sharp pain that always accompanied her movements, she lifted Eli in her arms, surprising herself with how light he was, further evidence of the deprivations they faced. The boy's small body seemed as fragile as a porcelain doll, and Kayla held him as if he were the most precious treasure in the world, because for her, he truly was. "I'm going to save you, Eli. I promise." "Hold on tight, little brother. Don't leave me alone in this world," she murmured against her brother's hair, like a desperate prayer. Kayla left the improvised shelter, feeling Eli's weight in her arms and the searing pain in her deformed leg. Each step was an exercise in pure willpower. Her right leg, shorter and twisted since birth, protested with every movement, sending waves of pain through her small, malnourished body. But Kayla ignored the physical pain, focusing only on the warmth she could still feel emanating weakly from her brother's body. The proof that there was still time, that there was still hope. "Hang on, Eli. We're almost at the hospital. They'll help you. They'll make you smile again for me," Kayla said, more to comfort herself than her unconscious brother. The streets were beginning to come alive around them. Vendors prepared their stalls. Hurried workers walked toward their jobs, all immersed in their own concerns, barely noticing the girl desperately limping with a child in her arms. Some curious or pitying glances occasionally turned toward Kayla, but no one stopped to help. Invisibility was something she had become accustomed to on the streets, but at that moment, people's indifference seemed an unbearable cruelty. "Please, someone help me. My brother is very sick," shouted Kayla to a group of passing people, but her words were carried away by the wind, ignored as background noise in the urban symphony. After what seemed like an eternity, Kayla finally spotted the hospital. The large white building stood like a beacon of hope amid her despair. With the last strength she could gather, she quickened her pace, ignoring the excruciating pain that now rose from her leg to her spine, making her entire body tremble. The emergency entrance was full of people, some visibly ill, others just companions, all waiting for care with expressions ranging from impatience to resignation. "Please let me through, it's an emergency. My little brother isn't breathing properly," begged Kayla, trying to make her way through the crowd with Eli firmly secure in her arms. Upon reaching the reception desk, Kayla found a middle-aged receptionist with a tired expression and distant gaze. The other woman was typing something on the computer, not even raising her eyes when Kayla approached, breathless and desperate. The contrast between the urgency Kayla felt and the bureaucratic calmness of the hospital was striking, almost surreal. "Please, Mom, my brother needs a doctor right now. He's not breathing properly. He's very cold. Please help us," exclaimed Kayla, her voice choked with tears and physical exertion. The receptionist finally raised her eyes from the computer, analyzing Kayla from head to toe with a look that mixed boredom and distrust. Kayla's appearance didn't help. Dirty and torn clothes, disheveled hair, face stained with dirt and tears. It was easy for the employee to categorize her as just another indigent trying to get free treatment. "Do you have health insurance, identification documents, a legal guardian?" asked the receptionist, her monotonous tone revealing she already knew the answer. Kayla's heart sank at hearing those questions. Documents, health insurance, legal guardians, concepts distant from the reality of two orphaned children living on the streets. For a moment she considered lying, inventing some story about parents who would arrive soon or lost documents, but something within her said that the truth, as painful as it was her only option in that desperate moment. "We're orphans, ma'am. Our parents died 6 months ago in an accident. We don't have documents or insurance or anyone. We only have each other, and now my brother is dying in my arms. Please have compassion," begged Kayla, her voice breaking into sobs as she held Eli tighter against her chest. The receptionist looked at Eli for the first time, noting the boy's pallor and his apparent unconsciousness. For a fleeting instant, something like compassion passed through her eyes, but was soon replaced by the professional and distant expression. She adjusted her glasses on her nose and sighed, as if lamenting being the bearer of bad news. "I'm sorry, little one, but without documentation or advance payment, we can't provide care. Those are the hospital rules. Perhaps you can try the Social Assistance Center on the other side of town. They might be able to help with the necessary documents," replied the receptionist, already shifting her gaze to the next person in line. For Kayla, those words were like a slap in the face. Social Assistance Center? On the other side of town? Eli didn't have hours, let alone days, to wait for bureaucracy. Anger and despair mixed in her chest, threatening to suffocate her. How could they deny help to a dying child, simply because of papers and money? "My brother will die if he's not treated now." "How can you do this? Please, someone help!" shouted Kayla, her voice echoing through the emergency room lobby. Some gazes turned to her momentarily, some curious, others uncomfortable, few compassionate, but nobody intervened. The receptionist called the next patient, effectively dismissing Kayla and Eli. The girl remained paralyzed for a few seconds, feeling the weight of Eli in her arms, the weight of injustice in her heart, the weight of impossibility crushing her hopes. "I won't give up on you, Eli. Never. I'll find someone who will help us, I promise," whispered Kayla into her brother's ear as she slowly walked out of the hospital, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the sun was already higher in the sky, but its warmth seemed not to reach Kayla. She sat on the curb, cradling Eli in her arms, looking at his pale and peaceful little face, so different from the cheerful and talkative boy she knew. Tears were flowing freely now, further blurring the dirt on her face while sobs shook her exhausted body. "What am I going to do now, Eli? Where are we going? Who's going to help us?" asked Kayla, her voice almost inaudible, broken by pain and despair. It was at this moment, when hopelessness threatened to consume her completely, that Kayla noticed a man in a white coat leaving the hospital. He was walking hurriedly, checking his wristwatch, apparently late for some appointment. Something about him, perhaps the worried expression on his face or simply the white coat that symbolized the help Eli so desperately needed, ignited a last spark of hope in Kayla's heart. "Please, doctor, wait! I need help!" shouted Kayla, trying to stand up with Eli in her arms, her body protesting with the effort after the long walk to the hospital. The man, Dr. Harlan, hesitated for a moment upon hearing the desperate cry. Years of experience as a physician had taught him to recognize genuine urgency in someone's tone of voice. He turned around looking for the source of the call, and his eyes found Kayla, a visibly poor and malnourished girl holding what appeared to be a smaller child, apparently unconscious. "Please, doctor, my little brother. He's not breathing right. He's very cold." "Nobody wants to help us in there," begged Kayla, grabbing the doctor's leg with one hand while firmly holding Eli with the other. Dr. Harlan looked at the girl and at the small body in her arms. He was a pediatric cardiologist, used to seeing sick children, but something in the scene before him deeply touched his heart. The determination in the girl's eyes, despite the evident despair, painfully contrasted with the quietness of her brother. For a moment he thought about his own commitments, the appointment for which he was late, the patients who were waiting for him. But then he looked again at the boy in his sister's arms and made his decision. "Let me see," he said, kneeling down to examine Eli right there on the sidewalk in front of the hospital. With experienced fingers, Dr. Harlan checked Eli's pulse, listened to his heart, observed his coloration. Each passing second made his expression more grave. The boy was in critical condition, possibly suffering from a serious heart condition complicated by malnutrition and exposure to cold. The doctor looked at Kayla, seeing the growing terror in the girl's eyes as he examined her brother. He knew he needed to be honest, but gentle. "This boy is still alive, but he won't survive if we don't get immediate treatment," said Dr. Harlan, carefully lifting Eli in his arms. "I can take him to my office for you to say goodbye, or we can try to do something, although the chances are small. The decision is yours." Kayla felt the world spinning around her with those words. Say goodbye? No, she couldn't accept that. As long as there was a breath of life in Eli, she would fight for him with all her strength. The girl wiped away her tears with the dirty sleeve of her shirt, straightened her shoulders, and looked directly into the doctor's eyes with a burning determination. "Let's try everything, doctor. Please, save my brother. He's all I have in this world, and I'll do anything to keep him alive, anything," replied Kayla, her voice firm despite the tears that continued to fall. Dr. Harlan nodded, respecting the little one's courage. He began to walk quickly toward a side entrance of the hospital, carrying Eli carefully. Kayla followed him, limping as fast as her disabled leg would allow, ignoring the pain that was now so intense it seemed to burn her flesh. Tears silently streamed down her dirty face, tracing clear paths through the dirt accumulated from days on the streets. "You're brave, little one. What's your name?" asked the doctor as he walked, trying to keep Kayla conscious and focused to prevent her from going into shock. "Kayla, doctor. And my brother is Eli. He's only 4 years old, and he's very strong, always smiling even when we're hungry or cold." "Please don't let his smile disappear from this world," she responded, her voice choked with emotion and physical effort. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Kayla noticed the curious and surprised looks from the staff, seeing Dr. Harlan carrying an unknown child, followed by an obviously homeless girl. No one stopped them, though, the respect for the doctor evident in how they made way for him to pass. Kayla felt a twinge of bitterness, thinking that the same door that had been closed to her minutes before now opened thanks to the doctor's presence. "Eli, we're getting help. The doctor is going to take care of you now." "So I'm here, little brother, I'm right here," whispered Kayla, even without knowing if her brother could hear her. As they entered a small but well-equipped room, Dr. Harlan carefully placed Eli on a stretcher. The white, strong light completely illuminated the little boy's face, revealing with cruel clarity how sick he was. His skin, normally of a golden tone, now had a frightening grayish pallor. His lips were bluish and his breathing was so weak it barely moved his chest. Kayla swallowed hard seeing her brother like this, so vulnerable, so close to death. "I need you to be strong now, Kayla. I'll do what I can for your brother, but I want you to be prepared. His condition is very serious," explained Dr. Harlan, quickly connecting monitors and preparing medications. Kayla nodded, unable to form words for a moment. She held Eli's cold little hand between hers, as if she could transfer her own life force to him through this simple touch. The machines around them began emitting sounds, measuring weak and irregular heartbeats, dangerously low blood pressure, inadequate oxygenation. Each beep seemed to count the precious seconds of Eli's life slipping through Kayla's fingers. "I know you don't know me, Eli, but I need you to fight now. Your sister is here, she brought you to me, and that already shows how much she loves you." "Fight for her, little one," said Dr. Harlan while working, speaking to Eli as if the boy could hear and understand him. Time seemed to drag on as the doctor examined Eli more thoroughly, checking his eyes, listening to his heart, palpating his abdomen. Kayla watched every movement with desperate attention, trying to interpret each expression on Dr. Harlan's face. She saw when his forehead wrinkled as he listened to Eli's heart, when his eyebrows raised as he checked something on the monitor, when he thoughtfully bit his lip while consulting some notes. "Doctor, what's happening to my brother?" "Please tell me the truth," asked Kayla, her voice small but determined. Dr. Harlan looked at Kayla, seeing beyond the dirt and rags, perceiving the inner strength of this child who, despite all adversities, fought so bravely for her brother's life. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, preparing to give news that he knew would shatter her. "Kayla, your brother has a serious heart problem. He was probably born with this condition, but life on the streets, lack of proper nutrition and the cold have made everything worse. At this moment, his heart is failing, and without specialized equipment and expensive medications, there's not much I can do beyond keeping him comfortable," the doctor explained, his voice professional but gentle. The words hit Kayla like physical blows, each one stealing a bit of air from her lungs. She looked at Eli, so small on that large stretcher, connected to tubes and wires, fighting for a life he had barely begun to live. The injustice of it all was overwhelming, that an innocent child like Eli had to suffer not only from the loss of his parents, from hunger and cold, but also from an illness that his small body could not fight alone. "There must be something we can do, doctor. Some medicine, some treatment. I can work, I can pay over time. I'll do anything," begged Kayla, clutching the sleeve of the doctor's coat. Dr. Harlan felt his heart break a little more. In his career, he had seen many tragedies, many children for whom medicine came too late, many families devastated by loss. But there was something especially cruel in the situation before him. A girl who had already lost everything, now about to lose the only person she had left in the world. As the doctor picked up Eli again in his arms, Kayla felt as if the floor disappeared beneath her feet. Dr. Harlan's words echoed in her mind, relentless in their finality. "Won't survive. Say goodbye." The reality she so feared was now before her, inevitable as the sunset. She followed the doctor through the hospital corridors, each step harder than the previous one, her disabled leg protesting with sharp pains, but no physical pain compared to the agony in her heart. "I can't lose you, Eli. I can't. I promised our parents I would take care of you, that I would keep you safe and happy. How will I go on without your smile and your hugs?" thought Kayla, tears of despair streaming down her face as she walked. Dr. Harlan's office was small but organized, with walls of a soft pastel tone that tried to bring some tranquility to the medical environment. Kayla remained motionless in a corner, her eyes fixed on her little brother, who now lay on an improvised stretcher. Eli looked so fragile connected to those machines, his small form almost disappearing among the white sheets. The doctor moved with silent efficiency through the space, checking monitors, adjusting equipment and noting data on a clipboard. Each minute that passed seemed like an eternity to Kayla, whose heart oscillated between flashes of hope and abysses of despair. "Please, doctor, tell me he's going to be okay." "He's strong. He's always been, even when we had nothing to eat or nowhere to sleep," whispered Kayla, her hands nervously pressing against each other. The heavy silence that filled the office was broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors, recording Eli's vital signs. Dr. Harlan finally moved away from the machines and approached Kayla, his face revealing an expression she already feared. There was compassion in his eyes, but also that gravity that only experienced doctors can demonstrate when they need to communicate difficult news. He pulled up a chair and sat in front of the girl, placing himself at her level, a simple gesture of respect that Kayla rarely received from adults. "Kayla, I need you to be very brave now. As I told you earlier, your brother suffers from a serious heart condition, I've managed to stabilize him temporarily, but it won't last very long." Kayla's world seemed to crumble with each word uttered by Dr. Harlan. She looked at Eli, so small and vulnerable on the stretcher, his chest rising and falling in an irregular rhythm that even her inexperienced eyes could tell wasn't right. The girl felt a deep pain in her chest, as if her own heart was failing in sympathy with her brother's. She swallowed the tears that threatened to fall, determined to be strong for Eli, even though inside she was shattered. "Is there any cure, doctor? Any treatment? Please, I'll do anything to save him," Kayla pleaded, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. The doctor sighed deeply, running his hand through his grey hair in a gesture that revealed his own internal conflict. He stood up and walked to a medicine cabinet, opening it only to reveal it almost empty. His fingers ran over the few available vials, as if searching for a miraculous solution he knew didn't exist there. Finally, he turned to Kayla, his shoulders slightly slumped with the weight of the news he needed to deliver. "There is a medication, an experimental enzyme inhibitor, that could help Eli's heart function properly again. But it's extremely expensive and I don't have free access to it," explained the doctor, briefly consulting his wristwatch. "And time is crucial. Without this medication in the next 24 hours, his heart will stop permanently." Kayla felt her own heart almost stop upon hearing those words. 24 hours. 1 day. That was all that remained of her little brother's life without that medication. Her mind raced, desperately seeking solutions, possibilities, anything she could do to save Eli. She had faced desperate situations before. Hunger, cold, persecution, rejection, but nothing compared to the terror of knowing that Eli's life depended on a medication she probably could never obtain. "How much does this medication cost, doctor?" Kayla finally asked, her eyes showing a fierce determination that contrasted with her small body, weakened by life on the streets. The doctor hesitated for a moment, clearly reluctant to pronounce a value he knew was impossible for a homeless child. But there was something in Kayla's look that compelled him to respond with honesty, to treat her not with condescension, but with the respect her willpower deserved. He adjusted his glasses on his nose and finally answered, his voice low, almost a whisper. $6,000 per dose, he said with evident regret, and Eli will need 3 doses to have a chance of complete recovery. The number fell on Kayla like a crushing weight. $6,000. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life, much less possessed. On their best days of begging, she and Eli could gather perhaps $5, enough for a little food and nothing more. Getting $6,000 in less than 24 hours seemed as impossible as making the sun rise in the west. For a moment, despair threatened to consume her completely. "I'll get it," stated Kayla, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way to get that money." Dr. Harlan looked at the girl with a mixture of admiration and sadness. He had seen many desperate cases in his long career, many children for whom medicine came too late, many families destroyed by poverty and disease. But there was something uniquely moving about the determination of that ragged girl, with her disabled leg and her eyes that had seen too much suffering for her age. "Kayla, I want you to be realistic. The amount of money needed," he began, but was interrupted by the girl's intense gaze. "Doctor, I promised my parents before they died that I would take care of Eli, that I would keep him safe and happy. I will fulfill that promise no matter what," declared Kayla, her voice low but charged with an intensity that silenced the doctor. Understanding that he needed to give Kayla a moment with her brother, Dr. Harlan discreetly stepped away, going to check other equipment in the office. Kayla took advantage of the privacy to approach Eli, carefully sitting on the edge of the stretcher. She gently touched her brother's face, feeling his skin still cold, but not as icy as it was when she found him that morning. Her thumb caressed the boy's soft cheek, while silent tears began to stream down her face. "Eli, I'll come back with the medicine, I promise. I won't let you go," whispered Kayla, bringing her face close to her brother's. "You're all I have in this world, little brother. Please hold on until I come back." Kayla leaned in and softly kissed Eli's forehead, letting her lips rest for a moment against his skin, as if she could transfer her own life force through that contact. When she pulled away, she noticed that one of her tears had fallen on her brother's face, and quickly wiped it away with her thumb. With one last gentle squeeze of Eli's small, motionless hand, Kayla stood up, determined to find a solution. "Doctor, please take care of him while I'm gone. I'll return as quickly as possible with the money for the medication," she said, heading to the door without looking back, fearing that if she saw Eli once more, her determination might falter. As she left the hospital, Kayla felt momentarily lost. The world outside continued as always, hurried people, passing cars, the constant buzz of the city, indifferent to the drama she was living. The contrast between the gravity of Eli's situation and the normality around her seemed almost offensive. How could people simply go on with their lives when her little brother was fighting to survive? But Kayla knew she couldn't afford the luxury of wasting time with such thoughts. Each minute that passed was 1 minute less in the countdown to save Eli. Where do I go now? How will I get so much money in so little time? She muttered to herself, feeling the weight of the impossibility of the task for the first time. Walking with no defined direction, Kayla spotted a small chapel across the street. She had never been particularly religious. Life on the streets rarely offered time or energy for spiritual matters. But in that moment of absolute despair, the simple sight of the modest religious building seemed to call to her. With hesitant steps, she crossed the street and entered the chapel, finding it empty except for some flickering candles on the altar. "Please God, show me a path," begged Kayla, kneeling with difficulty due to her disabled leg. "I can't lose my little brother too. He's so small, so good. He doesn't deserve to suffer like this." The silence that answered her prayers was both comforting and discouraging. Kayla remained kneeling for a few minutes, her tears falling silently on the chapel's stone floor. There was no divine sign, no miraculous revelation, just the quiet comfort of a moment of rest amid the chaos. When she finally stood up, her numb legs protested, reminding her of the time that was passing. "Thank you for the moment of peace," she whispered to the empty space of the chapel. "Now I need to act, not just pray." As she left the chapel, Kayla blinked against the afternoon sunlight. It was then that she saw a row of luxury cars passing on the main avenue, their chrome gleaming under the sun, their drivers protected behind dark windows. A sudden thought occurred to her. Those people in their expensive cars certainly had money, much more than she would ever dream of possessing. Perhaps she could offer something in exchange for help. "I can wash cars," thought Kayla, a plan beginning to form in her desperate mind. "If I can wash many, maybe I can gather enough money for at least one dose of the medication." With renewed determination, Kayla looked for the materials she would need. In a nearby trash can, she found an old bucket with a crack on the side, but which could still hold water. From a clothesline in an abandoned building, she got some torn rags that would serve as cleaning cloths. A public tap in a nearby park provided the water she needed, although she had to make several trips limping to fill the bucket. "It's not much, but it's a start," she encouraged herself, looking at her improvised materials. "I need to find a place with many expensive cars." Following her instinct, Kayla headed to the city's financial district, where she knew she would find elegant office buildings and parking lots full of luxury vehicles. The journey was long and painful with her disabled leg and the weight of the bucket, but she refused to rest, aware of every minute passing in the countdown to save Eli. When she finally arrived, she positioned herself strategically at a busy corner, where cars stopped at the traffic light. "Wash your car, sir." "Only $2, I'll make it shine," Kayla offered to the first driver, a man in a suit who barely gave her a glance before closing his car window. The hours dragged on as Kayla approached car after car, facing mostly indifference, occasionally irritation, and rarely, very rarely, a nod that allowed her to quickly clean a windshield in exchange for a few coins. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since the day before, having saved what little food she had managed to get for Eli. The bitter irony that now this food remained untouched in their hideout while Eli fought for his life in the hospital did not escape her perception. "I can't think about food now. Every penny counts to save Eli," she reminded herself, ignoring the dizziness she was beginning to feel due to hunger and fatigue. The sun began its descent on the horizon, painting the sky with orange hues that cruelly contrasted with Kayla's growing despair. She counted her savings, gathering all the coins she had managed to collect during her exhausting day of work. $15. After hours of uninterrupted work, of pleading, of physical effort that made her leg burn as if it were on fire, all she had managed was a minimal fraction of what she needed. "This is nothing," she muttered, looking dejectedly at the few coins in her dirty hand. "How am I going to get $6,000 this way?" Night fell over the city, bringing with it a cutting cold that penetrated Kayla's thin, tattered clothes. The streetlights came on, casting yellowish circles on the asphalt. The flow of cars diminished, but Kayla remained at her post, now approaching the few vehicles that still passed by. Her fingers were hurt from scrubbing, her nails broken, her skin cracked from constant contact with cold water. But the physical pain was almost welcome. It kept her awake, focused, preventing despair from consuming her completely. "Please, sir, just a few dollars to wash your car," she begged each driver, her voice increasingly hoarse from repeating the same words. A public clock on a nearby building showed mercilessly the passage of time. Kayla watched it with growing horror, realizing that almost 20 hours had passed since she had left Eli at the hospital. Only 4 hours remained of the fatal deadline established by Dr. Harlan. 4 hours to get $6,000, a task that seemed more impossible with each passing minute. "I can't give up. Eli would never give up on me," she told herself, furiously scrubbing the windshield of a car whose driver had permitted her intervention with a distracted nod. Exhaustion made each movement more difficult, each breath more painful. The cold intensified, making Kayla's fingers turn bluish and numb, making her work even harder. Silent tears began to stream down her face as she scrubbed the glass, mixing with the water on the windshield, leaving marks that she desperately tried to remove, determined to do a good job even in her deplorable state. "Please, God," sobbed Kayla, her hands trembling from cold and fatigue. "Help me save my brother. I don't know what else to do." It was in this moment of absolute despair that a black limousine, long and gleaming, stopped beside her. The vehicle was so elegant, so imposingly luxurious, that it almost seemed like a vision from another world in the desolate scenario where Kayla found herself. For an instant she was paralyzed, the dirty cloth still in her trembling hands, as she watched the dark glass of the passenger window slowly lowering, revealing the illuminated interior of the vehicle and the silhouette of someone who could change her destiny. The limousine window descended silently, revealing the luxurious interior of the vehicle and the face of Victor Langston. Even seated, his presence was imposing, with striking features that betrayed his aristocratic origin and penetrating eyes accustomed to evaluating business opportunities in fractions of a second. He wore an impeccably cut suit that, even to inexperienced eyes like Kayla's, clearly cost more than she could ever earn in years of work on the streets. Victor Langston wasn't just rich. He was powerful, the kind of man whose name was whispered with reverence in business circles and with fear by competitors. His reputation for coldness in business preceded him. It was said that he could destroy an entire company without his impassive expression changing for a second. "Get away from the car, girl, Mr. Langston doesn't need your services," said the driver, quickly getting out and walking around the vehicle to shoo Kayla away, as if she were an unwanted animal. "Go bother someone else. I told you to leave." The driver's immediate reaction didn't surprise Kayla. Throughout the day, she had faced the same kind of treatment, sometimes indifference, sometimes open hostility. This man in an elegant uniform saw her only as another inconvenient beggar, a stain on the urban landscape that should be removed from his important boss's sight. Kayla instinctively backed away, her small weakened body trembling not just from the night's cold and the dampness of her soaked clothes, but also from the fear of yet another rejection, of yet another door closing when Eli's time was quickly running out. "Wait," Victor ordered in a surprisingly soft voice, but one that carried undeniable authority. "Leave her alone." The driver froze instantly, as if struck by an invisible lightning bolt. Victor's order, though calm, did not allow for disobedience. He respectfully backed away, returning to his place behind the wheel, while casting a confused look at his boss through the rearview mirror. Kayla remained motionless, nervously clutching the soaked and dirty rag between fingers injured from ceaseless work. Something in the rich man's gaze kept her rooted in place, a mixture of curiosity and something else she couldn't identify. "What are you doing, girl?" asked Victor, leaning slightly to better observe the small figure before him. It's very late for a child to be alone on the street. Kayla swallowed hard, gathering courage to speak to this man who emanated power and wealth. The fine rain now punished her skin with more intensity, but she barely felt the cold drops. Her entire being was concentrated on forming coherent words, on making this last desperate appeal count. She straightened her shoulders as much as she could, determined to maintain a last vestige of dignity, even in her deplorable state. "Washing cars, sir," she replied, her trembling voice betraying the physical and emotional exhaustion she felt. "My little brother is dying in the hospital. He needs a medication that costs $6,000 in the next." Her eyes met a large digital clock installed on the nearest building, and her heart almost stopped when she saw how much time had passed. The hours had slipped like water between her fingers while she tirelessly washed cars, and now the cruel reality of the luminous numbers hit her with full force. "Few hours or he'll die," she completed, unable to contain the tears that now ran freely down her dirty face, creating small, clean paths amidst the accumulated dirt. Victor carefully observed the girl before him, noticing details that his business-trained eye did not miss. The barefoot and injured feet, the tattered clothes that barely protected her from the cold, the slight deviation in her posture caused by her visibly deformed leg. But he went beyond the desolate physical appearance. He noticed the fierce determination in the tired eyes, the way she stood despite clearly being on the verge of collapse, the pride that prevented her from simply begging for money. There was something about that girl that completely contrasted with what he would expect from a street child, something that aroused his rarely stimulated curiosity. "And how much have you managed so far?" he asked, his neutral tone not revealing whether he was just prolonging the conversation out of politeness or if he really cared about the answer. Kayla looked at the small, cracked plastic container she had found in the trash, where she kept her day's earnings. Her dirty and trembling hand reached inside, pulling out a single time-worn coin. The disparity between what she had and what she needed was so astronomical that it bordered on the absurd, a cruel joke of fate. When she spoke, her voice was little more than a whisper, laden with all the frustration and powerlessness she felt. $37, sir, she confessed, extending the little she had earned as proof of both her work and failure. A disturbing silence settled between them, filled only by the sound of the rain that now fell more intensely, drumming on the roof of the limousine and soaking Kayla's already wet clothes even more. Victor continued to observe her without saying a word, his face a neutral mask that revealed no thought or emotion. I felt time slipping away mercilessly. Each second that passed in that silence was 1 second less in Eli's life. She had already accepted the rejection when Victor's voice cut through the night air again. "How can I help you?" he finally asked, the simple words falling like an unexpected lightning bolt amid the storm of despair that enveloped Kayla. The girl's eyes widened with a sudden explosion of hope, so intense it almost hurt. Her first impulse was to beg for the $6,000, to throw herself at the feet of this man who could clearly provide such an amount without even missing it. But something deeper inside her manifested, the same stubborn pride that had kept her fighting through the streets since her parents' death, protecting Eli, refusing to surrender even when everything seemed lost. Taking a deep breath, Kayla responded with surprising dignity for someone in her desperate situation. "I don't want charity, sir. I can work for you," she said firmly, despite the tears still running down her face. "I can clean your house, your cars, do anything, if you can pay for my brother's medicine. I promise I'll work for every cent." The response caught Victor completely off guard. In his world of ruthless business and superficial relationships based on interest, finding such dignity in a street child was something he wasn't prepared for. Here was a hungry girl, soaked, clearly at the limit of her physical strength, offering work instead of simply accepting handouts. Something deep and long dormant moved inside Victor Langston's chest, a feeling he had suppressed for so many years that he almost didn't recognize it when it resurfaced. "Why don't you simply ask for the money? It would be easier," he questioned, genuinely curious about the answer as he studied Kayla's determined expression. Kayla took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders despite the exhaustion weighing on them. The question made her reflect on her own motivation, on the values her parents had taught her before they departed, on the promise she had made to herself to maintain not only Eli's life, but also his dignity intact. When she answered, her voice was low but firm, carrying a wisdom that went far beyond her few years. "Because the only thing I still have, sir, besides my brother, is my dignity. And I promised him that I would never lose it, even in the most difficult moments. He deserves a sister with honor." Something extraordinary happened then. Victor Langston's eyes, known in business circles for their icy, calculating gleam, visibly softened. An unexpected moisture began to accumulate in them, something that hadn't happened for decades. The man who had built an empire based on cold, rational decisions, who showed no emotion, even in the most tense moments of billion-dollar negotiations, felt tears forming for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Let's go to the hospital now," he said abruptly, extending his arm to open the limousine door. "Your brother can't wait any longer." Kayla hesitated for a moment, hardly believing what was happening. The open door of the limousine seemed like a portal to another world, so distant from her daily reality of struggle and deprivation that it almost seemed like a hallucination brought on by extreme fatigue. But the relentless clock on the wall of the nearby building reminded her that there was no time for hesitation. Eli's life depended on every minute. "Thank you, sir. I will never forget your kindness, and I'll start working to pay my debt as soon as Eli is better," she said, timidly entering the luxurious vehicle, trying to occupy as little space as possible on the soft leather seat. The interior of the limousine was another universe, heated, dry, with the soft aroma of fine leather and a discreet perfume that Kayla had never smelled before. The contrast with her existence on the streets was so shocking that for a moment she felt disoriented, as if she had entered a particularly vivid dream. Victor didn't seem bothered by the water dripping from her soaked clothes onto the impeccable seat, nor by the dirt that she inevitably transferred to the immaculate interior of the vehicle. To Central Hospital, and quickly, he ordered the driver, who immediately set the vehicle in motion, cutting through the night rain with the silent efficiency of a perfectly adjusted machine. During the journey, Victor remained silent, occasionally looking at Kayla, who remained rigid in her seat as if afraid to relax and discover that everything was just a cruel illusion. The businessman seemed to be waging some kind of internal battle, his thoughts hidden behind his now thoughtful expression. The city passed by in luminous blurs through the window, the nearly deserted streets at that hour, allowing the driver to accelerate without compromising safety. "What's your brother's name? And the doctor who's treating him?" Victor finally asked, breaking the tense silence that filled the vehicle. Kayla turned her gaze from the window, meeting Victor's eyes with surprising intensity. There was so much at stake, so much hope and fear mixed in her small heart that she could barely organize her thoughts. When she answered, her voice was firmer, fueled by the real possibility of saving her brother. "My brother's name is Eli. He's only 4 years old. Dr. Harlan is taking care of him. He was very kind to us when everyone else rejected us," she explained, the words coming out quickly, as if she feared Victor's interest might evaporate if she took too long. Victor nodded silently, memorizing the information while taking a phone from the inner pocket of his jacket. With the efficiency of someone accustomed to making things happen with a simple command, he dialed a number and waited only 2 rings before someone answered on the other end. His voice took on an authoritative tone that allowed no questions. "I need you to immediately locate a medication, an experimental enzyme inhibitor for cardiac conditions. I want 3 doses at Central Hospital in 20 minutes. I don't care how much it costs or what needs to be done. This is maximum priority." Kayla watched with amazement the subtle transformation in Victor's posture as he gave precise commands on the phone. This was the businessman who had built an empire, who made things happen through sheer force of will and seemingly unlimited resources. For someone who spent her life fighting for every crumb, every dry corner to sleep, witnessing such a display of power was almost surreal. "Did Dr. Harlan explain exactly what your brother's condition is?" Victor asked after hanging up the phone, turning his full attention to Kayla. The question brought back all the anguish that had momentarily been overshadowed by sudden hope. Kayla bit her lower lip, trying to remember the doctor's exact words, aware that any information could be crucial to saving Eli's life. Her fingers nervously clutched the soaked fabric of her t-shirt as she answered. He said it's a serious heart condition, probably since birth. Eli's heart doesn't work properly and is getting weaker. Without the medication in 24 hours, he'll... Her voice faltered, unable to complete the terrible sentence. The limousine stopped smoothly in front of the hospital entrance, and even before the driver could circle the vehicle to open the door, Victor was already getting out, extending his hand to help Kayla. The contact with that strong and secure hand was strangely comforting for the girl who had spent so much time fighting alone. With a tacit decision, Victor adjusted his pace to Kayla's, respecting the limitations imposed by her disabled leg as they quickly headed for the entrance. "I'll ensure your brother receives the best possible treatment, Kayla. I have resources and connections that can make things happen quickly," he said, his voice taking on a gentle tone he rarely used. "Just focus on being by his side now." The contrast between the previous reception and the current one couldn't be more striking. While previously Kayla had been practically ignored and dismissed, now beside Victor Langston, doors literally opened. Hospital staff appeared almost magically to attend to them, barely disguised looks of surprise directed at the soaked and ragged figure of the girl next to the powerful businessman. Kayla observed everything with a mixture of relief and indignation. The same people who had denied help to Eli were now falling over themselves in attention merely due to the presence of someone rich and influential. "I need to speak immediately with Dr. Harlan about patient Eli," Victor demanded upon reaching reception, his voice calm but carrying indisputable authority. In a matter of minutes, they were led to the floor where Eli was being treated. Kayla's heart accelerated as she approached her brother's room, the reality of the critical situation returning with full force. When Dr. Harlan appeared in the hallway, his tired expression transformed into surprise at seeing Kayla accompanied by none other than Victor Langston, a figure known to everyone in the city. "Dr. Harlan, I brought someone who's going to help us. Mr. Langston is going to pay for Eli's medication," announced Kayla, her voice trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and renewed hope. The doctor looked from Kayla to Victor, clearly trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Without wasting time on unnecessary explanations, Victor took control of the situation with the same efficiency he demonstrated in his business operations. In a few precise sentences, he updated the doctor on the arrangements he had already made. "The medication will be here in minutes. I want to ensure the boy receives the best possible treatment and all resources necessary for his complete recovery." "Cost is not an issue," declared Victor, pulling a card from his pocket and handing it to Dr. Harlan. "This is my personal contact. Any need at any time, contact me directly." Dr. Harlan seemed momentarily speechless, but quickly regained his professional composure. Years of medical experience had taught him not to question miracles when they appeared, especially when lives were at stake. With a grateful nod, he pocketed the card and turned his attention back to Kayla. "We'll administer the medication as soon as it arrives." "Every minute counts now," he explained gently. "You can wait here while I prepare everything." As the doctor quickly walked away to make the necessary preparations, Kayla and Victor remained in the hospital corridor. A silence charged with expectation hung between them. Kayla couldn't believe the turn her life had taken in the last few hours, from absolute despair to a real possibility of saving Eli. She wanted to thank Victor, but words seemed inadequate to express the magnitude of her gratitude. "Mr. Langston, I don't even know how to," she began, but was interrupted by the arrival of a hurried messenger, carrying a small refrigerated box. The action accelerated dramatically from there. Dr. Harlan returned, took the box containing the precious medication, and quickly disappeared into the room where Eli was. Kayla wanted to follow him, desperate to be by her brother's side during this crucial moment, but a nurse gently stopped her, explaining that they needed space to work. Thus, Kayla and Victor found themselves confined to the waiting room, time seeming to drag, while Eli's fate was decided just a few meters away. "He's going to survive, isn't he?" asked Kayla in a low voice, her eyes fixed on the closed door that separated her from her little brother. Victor, normally so confident in his statements, hesitated. He didn't want to give Kayla false hopes, but he also couldn't bear the idea of stealing from her the last thread of hope. He opted for gentle honesty, something rare in his life of half-truths and strategic manipulations. "We've done everything we could, Kayla. The medication arrived. Dr. Harlan seems to be a good doctor. Now we can only wait and trust, he replied, surprising himself with the genuine emotion in his own voice. Minutes turned into hours of agonizing waiting. Kayla alternated between periods of fervent hope and moments of absolute terror as she imagined a life without Eli. Victor remained by her side the entire time, silent but present, offering the kind of support that needed no words. When finally the treatment room door opened and Dr. Harlan emerged, his face was unreadable, the professional expression not revealing whether he brought good or bad news. Kayla rose immediately, her eyes fixed on the doctor's face, desperately searching for any sign. A clock on the wall marked exactly 24 hours since Dr. Harlan had given his initial diagnosis. The fatal deadline had just expired. Kayla's heart seemed about to explode with anxiety as she waited for the doctor to speak. But before any word could be said, she interpreted Dr. Harlan's neutral expression as confirmation of her worst fear. They had arrived too late. The entire world seemed to collapse around Kayla. Her legs, already weak from the day's exertion, finally gave way. Without a word, without a sound, she collapsed in tears, her small body shaken by silent sobs of a pain so deep that it seemed endless. It was Victor who supported her, surprising himself and everyone around by opening his arms and hugging her tightly against his chest. "I'm sorry, little one." "I'm truly sorry," he murmured, his own voice choked with emotions he hadn't felt for decades. Something extraordinary was happening to Victor Langston at that moment. The man who had built a reputation based on coldness and calculation felt his heart, dormant for so long, awakening before this child's genuine pain. The arms that normally signed ruthless contracts now offered comfort. The eyes that evaluated business opportunities now filled with tears for a girl he had met just a few hours ago. It was as if an internal wall had collapsed, releasing long-repressed feelings. Meanwhile, Dr. Harlan stood at the doorway, holding Eli's medical chart, his face still not revealing whether there was reason for hope or if the despair consuming Kayla was, in fact, justified. Dr. Harlan's words hung in the air for a moment, as if time itself hesitated, before allowing their full meaning to be absorbed by Kayla and Victor. The doctor, with deep dark circles revealing hours of intense effort, finally allowed a tired smile to appear on his face, completely transforming his previously grave expression. His eyes, once tense with the concentration required by the delicate procedure, now shone with the satisfaction that only truly vocational doctors know when saving a life. "It was a close call," he finally said, breaking the silence laden with expectation. "We managed to administer the medication in time. He's safe." The impact of those simple words on Kayla was immediate and overwhelming. The girl who hadn't eaten or slept properly in days, who had exhausted every ounce of energy in her small body, in the desperate fight to save her brother, felt her legs weaken. A wave of emotion so intense it seemed physical swept through her body, leaving her momentarily speechless. Tears, no longer of despair but of pure joy and relief, flowed freely down her dirty face, while broken sobs escaped from her chest. "He'll live? Eli will really live?" she asked with a trembling voice, needing to hear the confirmation once more to truly believe it. "This isn't a dream." Victor, standing beside Kayla, experienced his own emotional storm. The man who for decades had shown no feeling beyond calculated indifference felt something warm and unfamiliar expanding in his chest. A smile, an expression his employees rarely witnessed, formed on his normally austere face, softening his features and removing years from his appearance. His hands, accustomed to signing contracts that decided the fates of entire companies, trembled slightly as they rested on Kayla's bony shoulders in a gesture of support. "Can we see him now?" asked Victor, his normally commanding voice now gentle, almost hesitant. Dr. Harlan nodded, gesturing for them to follow. Kayla moved as if in a dream, each step taking her closer to a miracle that until a few hours ago had seemed impossible. As they entered the room, the sight of Eli caused her to bring her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob of relief. The boy was lying peacefully, connected to monitors and tubes, but the difference was impressive. His breathing was regular, color slowly returning to his previously pale cheeks, and although still unconscious, he no longer had the appearance of being on the brink of death. "The medication worked better than we expected. "His heart is responding exceptionally well to the therapy," explained the doctor, checking Eli's vital signs with evident satisfaction. "He'll remain under observation for the next few days, but the critical phase has passed." Kayla approached the bed timidly, almost afraid that any sudden movement might undo the miracle before her eyes. With infinite care, she held Eli's small hand between hers, feeling the warmth returning to her brother's body. The contact seemed to restore something fundamental within her, as if each beat of Eli's now stabilized heart filled a painful void in her own chest. "Thank you, God. Thank you for not taking him too," she whispered, leaning down to gently kiss her brother's forehead. "You're so strong, Eli. I always knew you were." Victor observed the scene with an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. There was something in the interaction between the siblings that touched on deeply buried memories, on wounds that had never properly healed. The contrast between Kayla's small, malnourished body and his own imposing billionaire posture seemed to symbolize something greater, a disparity that went beyond the physical or financial. It was an abyss between innocence and experience, between unconditional love and the emotional emptiness in which he had lived for so many years. "You need to rest too, Kayla," Victor said gently, noticing how the girl struggled to keep her eyes open despite her evident exhaustion. "I can arrange for a bed here next to his." Kayla turned to Victor, a gratitude so intense in her eyes that it almost made him look away. She suddenly seemed to remember the vital role he had played in saving Eli, and her exhausted mind began to process what this meant, the immense debt she now owed to this powerful man. "Thank you, sir. I will work for you for as long as necessary to pay this debt," she said, with all the seriousness her childish voice could carry. "I can clean floors, windows, anything. I'm strong and I learn quickly." The declaration, made with such dignity by a child who could barely stand from exhaustion, hit Victor like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't respond, emotion forming a knot in his throat, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his family's funeral 30 years ago. The mention of child labor, which in any other context would have seemed absurd or even illegal, carried a different meaning here. It was the only currency Kayla possessed, her only way to maintain dignity while thanking for something priceless. "Rest now," he simply replied, unable to elaborate more at that moment. "We'll talk about it later." In the hours that followed, Victor remained at the hospital, making occasional calls, organizing details, ensuring that Eli received the best possible care. He observed Kayla, who had finally yielded to fatigue and slept deeply in an armchair beside her brother's bed, her hand still holding his even during sleep. This child's determination, her unwavering loyalty, her sense of honor, all of this awakened something within him that had remained dormant for decades. While Dr. Harlan continued monitoring Eli throughout the night, Victor faced his own internal revolution. 30 years ago, he had lost his wife and young son in a devastating accident. The pain had been so unbearable that he had transformed it into something different, a relentless ambition, an insatiable quest for power and wealth, a shield of coldness that had protected him from feeling anything again. In a single night, looking at two orphaned children who clung to each other against all odds, something of that shield began to crack. A week passed, with Eli recovering rapidly under intensive medical care. Victor had resolved that Kayla should also receive treatment for her deficient leg and for the chronic malnutrition that affected both children. At some point during that week, a decision had formed in his mind. Not a calculated decision like those he normally made, but something born of a deeper and truer impulse. On the day of Eli's hospital discharge, Victor found Kayla sitting on the edge of her brother's bed, teaching him to play a finger game. The boy, still fragile but with a healthy glow returning to his eyes, laughed as he tried to imitate his sister's movements. It was the first time Victor heard Eli's laughter, a crystalline and pure sound that seemed to illuminate the entire sterile hospital room. "Kayla," he called softly, approaching the siblings. "Now that Eli is being discharged, we need to talk about your future." The girl immediately became serious, her body tense as if expecting bad news. She instinctively pulled Eli closer, a protective gesture that spoke volumes about their past experiences. Her voice, when she spoke, tried to sound strong, but Victor could detect the underlying fear. "I'm ready to start working, sir." "To pay for everything you've done for us," she said, straightening her shoulders. Victor sat in the chair next to the bed, placing himself at eye level with the children. For a moment, he just observed the two. Kayla, protective and determined despite her own fragile body. Eli, innocent and confident in his sister's love. Then, he took a deep breath before speaking. "Actually," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "I have a different proposal." A month later, the transformation was almost impossible to believe. On Victor's vast property, Eli ran through the well-kept garden, his laughter echoing in the afternoon air as he chased a colorful ball. His body, once skeletal, now showed the healthy curves of normal childhood. Dressed in clean clothes appropriate for the season, with well-cut hair and rosy cheeks, he looked like a completely different child from that boy on the verge of death in the hospital. Kayla watched her brother from the porch, a serene smile on her also transformed face. Proper nutrition, medical care for her deficient leg, nights of peaceful sleep in a real bed. All this had worked a remarkable metamorphosis. But the most significant change was in her eyes. The constant fear, the incessant worry, had been replaced by something a child her age should have by right: hope. Beside you, Victor Langston observed the scene with an expression his business associates wouldn't recognize. The man known for his calculating coldness in corporate circles had found something that no corporate acquisition had ever given him: a chance for redemption, a new family, a purpose that went beyond the accumulation of wealth. In the eyes of those children, he had rediscovered his own humanity, buried for decades under layers of pain and self-imposed isolation. "Thank you for giving us a home," Kayla said softly, her gaze fixed on Eli, who was now happily rolling in the grass. Victor smiled, gently placing his hand on Kayla's shoulder. "No, little one," he replied sincerely. "Thank you for reminding me what it really means to have one. If Kayla and Eli's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment where you're from. And don't go anywhere. The next story is already appearing on screen, made especially for you. See you soon.